I'm very competitive and I am athletic. I like sports, but this was different, and this.
For an entire generation, one phrase defined 90s sitcom magic. Did I do that? Jaleel White, the man behind the unstoppable cultural force, Steve Urkel, wasn't just a TV star. He was a phenomenon. At his peak, he wasn't simply the funniest kid on television. He was television. And yet the same lovable character who brought laughter to millions also became the very thing that nearly destroyed his life. Because behind the suspenders, oversized glasses, and whiny charm was a young boy feeling trapped in a role he couldn't escape. When the laughter faded and the world moved on, Jaleel didn't just fade into Hollywood's background. He was pushed into isolation, depression, and a career collapse many never saw coming. But it wasn't just fame pressures or typecasting. Jaleel's story included heartbreak, betrayal, and a painful truth he kept hidden for years. A truth so heavy, it almost silenced one of TV's brightest young stars forever. Today, we uncover the struggles, the emotional battles, and the secret Jaleel White rarely speaks about. The secret that nearly cost him everything, including his sanity. This is the shocking, emotional, and deeply human story of the boy America loved, and the man who had to fight to reclaim his identity. Stay with us, because what happened next will change the way you see Steve Urkel. Forever. Long before Steve Urkel tripped into America's living rooms, Jaleel White was already auditioning his way through Hollywood's golden gates. Born in 1976 in Pasadena to hard-working parents, a dentist father and a stay-at-home mother who became his full-time manager, Jaleel wasn't forced into showbiz. He was invited into it. At just 3 years old, he caught the attention of casting directors with a unique spark and confidence far beyond his age. Commercials came quickly, and by grade school, Jaleel had appeared in dozens, often becoming the charming face behind household brands. Hollywood wasn't just noticing, they were circling. However, before success smiled on him, he came painfully close to starring in another iconic sitcom, The Cosby Show. Jaleel auditioned for the role of Rudy Huxtable, originally written as a boy. But when producers changed the character to a girl, Jaleel lost what could have been his breakout role. The disappointment was crushing. For a child, it was his first taste of the unpredictable heartbreak of Hollywood. Yet destiny had a different plan, one that would soon change everything. In 1989, Jaleel was cast for a one-episode appearance on a new ABC family sitcom called Family Matters. The character? A nerdy neighbor named Steve Urkel. He was meant as a throwaway gag, a quirky kid with suspenders and a high-pitched voice who would show up, annoy the Winslow family, and vanish forever. But something unexpected happened. The audience didn't just laugh. They exploded with love. Networks were flooded with calls. Fans couldn't get enough. Overnight, Steve Urkel became the show. Ratings shot up, merchandise flew off shelves, and suddenly the fate of the entire series rested on Jaleel's teenage shoulders. But with fame came a shadow. The world didn't see Jaleel White. They only saw Urkel. Producers demanded more episodes. Writers built plots entirely around him. Co-stars felt overshadowed. Suddenly, this once joyful opportunity came with pressure, whispers and Hollywood jealousy, and Jaleel, still just a kid, had no idea that this once-in-a-lifetime role would soon become the cage he'd struggled to escape for decades. When Family Matters exploded into a cultural phenomenon, Jaleel White became the beating heart of American sitcom comedy. Every Friday night, millions tuned in not to watch the Winslows, but to watch Steve Urkel fall, snort laugh, and transform chaos into charm. Children copied his glasses. Teens imitated his walk. Merchandising deals poured in, making the character a global pop icon. But behind the roaring applause lived a boy slowly drowning. Jaleel was no longer treated as a kid. He was a product. Television executives, advertisers, and even co-stars relied on him to keep the show alive. And he did, week after week, delivering comedic perfection under crushing pressure. But inside, a storm was brewing. Urkel was supposed to be a cameo, but he took over the show so completely that resentment grew among the original cast. Rumors circulated of tension on set. Some actors felt sidelined, fearing the show they signed up for had become the Urkel show. For a sensitive teenager seeking belonging, that atmosphere hurt deeply. While fans adored Steve, Jaleel struggled with something darker. The world didn't want him. They wanted the nerd. Everywhere he went, people shouted his catchphrase. Media interviews rarely asked about Jaleel. They wanted Urkel's voice, the glasses, the routine. To producers, he was irreplaceable. Yet to the industry, he was becoming typecast, locked in a character that swallowed his real identity. Puberty made the struggle worse. As his body changed, the awkward persona didn't fit as naturally. Jaleel once admitted looking in the mirror and wanting to scream. The world saw Urkel, and he just wanted to be Jaleel. He longed for mature roles, respect, and identity, to break free. Writers created Stefan Urkel, a smooth, handsome version of Steve. Fans loved it, but for Jaleel, the role revealed an uncomfortable truth. The world only accepted him when he didn't look like himself. It was a painful message for a young black actor fighting stereotypes in Hollywood, as fame locked him in a role he couldn't escape.
His school life vanished, his childhood vanished,
and solitude replaced everything normal kids enjoy. By the final seasons, burnout was visible. He was tired, anxious, and emotionally fragile. When the show ended in 1998, audiences moved on quickly. Hollywood moved on faster. Jaleel White didn't just lose a job. He lost identity, purpose, and the only world he'd ever known. The applause stopped. Scripts didn't flood in. And suddenly, the boy who once ruled television was alone, exhausted, and unsure if he'd ever act again. And the darkest chapter of his life was still coming, one filled with heartbreak, accusations, and a secret pain the public wouldn't learn about for years. When the cameras stopped rolling on Family Matters, Jaleel White didn't just walk away from a TV set, he walked into an identity crisis. The industry didn't line up with open arms. Casting directors only saw Urkel, and major studios didn't know where to place him. A lifetime of applause vanished overnight. He tried to reinvent himself, guest roles, voice acting, reality TV appearances. But with each audition, the same haunting look returned, recognition, followed by hesitation, and finally, a polite rejection. Jaleel once said that being remembered only as Urkel felt like being frozen in time, trapped in a costume he could never remove. But rejection wasn't the hardest part. The real breaking point came from something far more personal, the collapse of relationships and the weight of public judgment. In the 2010s, emotional accusations from a former partner surfaced, including claims of volatile arguments and intense emotional strain. Jaleel publicly denied abuse allegations, insisting he was being painted unfairly in a painful custody dispute. But even after he defended himself, the headlines lingered. In Hollywood, rumor travels faster than truth. For a man who spent his youth trying desperately to be seen as more than a character, being reduced to sensational headlines cut deep. He later admitted the period pushed him to his emotional limits, saying he felt misunderstood, hurt, and abandoned when he needed support most. At the same time, grief entered his life in a devastating way. His close friend and former Family Matters co-star Michelle Thomas, who played Myra, passed away from cancer shortly after the show ended. Jaleel described being at her bedside in her final moments. He called it one of the most painful experiences of his life, and it left scars that never fully healed. The world saw a smiling face. But behind interviews and public appearances, Jaleel faced overwhelming pressure to stay strong, move forward, and pretend everything was okay. Hollywood doesn't comfort fallen stars, and it replaces them. He was working, yes, but emotionally he was drifting. His identity, career momentum, personal relationships, and sense of purpose all felt like they were slipping through his fingers. And each time someone yelled, "Do the Urkel voice!" in public, he felt the weight of the past pulling him backward. A reminder that no matter how hard he tried, some people only saw him as a joke character frozen in the 90s. But this is not where his story ends in defeat. Because just when it seemed like Jaleel might disappear entirely, something inside him shifted, and he made a choice that would shape the rest of his life. A choice to rebuild, rediscover his worth, and confront the world not as Urkel, but as Jaleel White. For years, Jaleel White lived in the shadow of suspenders and thick glasses. But life has a way of giving those who endure a second act, if they're willing to fight for it. And fight he did. The turning point wasn't a dramatic Hollywood comeback moment. No sudden blockbuster role, no viral performance. Instead, it was quieter, more personal. Jaleel realized that chasing industry approval was a battle he would never win. So he stopped trying to run from Steve Urkel and instead learned to make peace with him. He began embracing nostalgia, appearing in tributes to 90s culture, reconnecting with former castmates, and laughing with the character rather than feeling trapped by him. Fans weren't mocking him, they were celebrating him. That shift in perspective was healing, and it opened doors he once thought were sealed forever. Career-wise, Jaleel pivoted. He became a voice actor, writer, and producer, proving he was far more than one role. He appeared in hit shows like Psych, The Big Bang Theory, Fresh Off the Boat, and even competed on Dancing with the Stars, winning new fans along the way. In 2021, he surprised everyone by launching his own cannabis brand, a business move no one expected. And the world noticed. Investors, entrepreneurs, and celebrities praised his evolution. He wasn't trying to be the next heartthrob or action star. He was becoming the architect of his own future. But the most important transformation happened off camera. Jaleel became a devoted father, often sharing moments with his daughter, describing fatherhood as his greatest purpose. In interviews, he spoke openly about mental health, Hollywood pressure, and the painful journey of rebuilding his identity. And slowly, the narrative shifted. He wasn't the kid who got stuck as Urkel. He became the man who survived it, learned from it, and turned childhood fame into lifelong resilience. Now at midlife, Jaleel stands not as a tragic fallen star, but as a symbol of endurance. A man who faced public scrutiny, emotional battles, grief, and identity loss, yet chose healing over bitterness. He didn't let Hollywood decide his worth. He defined it himself. The glasses, the suspenders, the clumsy walk, they'll always be part of pop culture. But they're not chains anymore. They're a legacy. A character who made millions laugh. A character who helped a young actor make history. And now, when people recognize him, many don't shout the old catchphrase. Instead, they say something far more meaningful. Thank you for my childhood. In the end, that's not a tragedy. It's triumph. Jaleel White didn't lose himself. He reclaimed himself. And that may be the greatest role he'll ever play.